Thank you, Steve. And we're so honored to be here today, back home, and in front of you as a church family that Marilyn and I so dearly love. And thank you for the opportunity to reflect on where we've been and what we've been doing the last year and a half. We kind of disappeared, didn't we? And some of you don't know what's been going on, and so they've asked if I would spend a few minutes this morning highlighting that or telling you what's happening. Three really significant things happened the last week of June 2017. Two of them were very significant to you as a church family and took place Sunday, June 25. The third thing happened a few days later. It was very significant to me and my family. But that Sunday, June 25th, 2017, we celebrated the 30th birthday of Grace Community Church. And that same Sunday, during the service, I handed the microphone that I had symbolically held for 30 years to our new lead pastor, Jack Napier, whom the Lord had brought here in answer to our prayers. And that moment marked kind of the climax of the pastoral leadership transition plan that we had been working on for nearly 2 years. The third thing that happened was later that week was that Marilyn and I celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary. That's a lot of big stuff happening in a short period of time. And, reflecting on that, on our marriage, I kind of thought if we stayed healthy and kind of kept at it, we would get to that 50th anniversary point. I just thought it would take a lot longer. We were so very thankful, and we are, that God gave us the grace to have a good marriage. And He's helped through that grace to sustain us and to grow us through all kinds of experiences through the years. And I want to be sure and publicly say that Marilyn has been the best kind of godly and supportive and creative woman that a man, and especially a pastor, could ever hope for. Our ministry life together began in the spring of 1970. When, as a young seminary student in the third of my 4 years here at the tender age, at the seminary, at the tender age of 25, we planted a little church called Bethany Bible Church in Plano, Texas, a Dallas suburb. We served there for 11 years. In 1981, we went to Pierre, South Dakota, to help a longtime friend with a new church. He was a high school, college, and seminary classmate. 5 great years we were there. And then in 1987, God led us here to Newton to join that group of 13 people who were already developing the vision of a Bible-believing, Jesus-following, gospel-focused church here in Newton that became Grace Community Church. On June 28, 1987, 46 people met upstairs in Cedar Village over there on... you probably know where it is, where Radio Shack used to be. And we met upstairs there for our very first service. I wouldn't be surprised if a few of you in this room today were in that service. The kind of grace that God gives to people to be married and live and serve together for 50 years is the same kind of grace that God gives pastors like me, who are able to serve nearly 50 years, 30 of them in one place. That doesn't just happen. That's not due to me. That's due to God's grace. The statistics on pastoral tenure aren't very good. 78% of pastors say they have no close friends. 1,500 pastors quit every month. 70% of pastors experience significant depression. Only 10% of pastors are going to retire as a pastor. And we are so thankful that we avoided becoming one of those statistics. And it was only by God's grace, which came to us countless times and in countless ways. But you know how that grace came mostly? It came through a wonderful cast of qualified and godly and engaged and unified body of elders and staff and other leaders. And it came through you, the church family. You and many others who have come before you, who were open and responsive and ears open to the word, willing to listen, willing to work, and willing to give. The highlight of our 30 years here really was the church planting initiative that resulted in the birth of 3 congregations: Grace Community Fellowship in Hillsboro, Grace Crossing in Mound Ridge, and New Anthem Community Church in Park City. And all of these 3 are thriving, healthy churches under excellent leadership. You know what? On any given Sunday morning, there will be 600 or 700 people in attendance in those churches. We've doubled ourselves in that sense. So when I handed off the baton to Jack, Pastor Jack, we had laid out a plan where I would stick around and help as needed and sort of fade into the background, overlapping for about 6 months or so. And that's what we'd been telling you. And it really seemed important to us to make a plan of some sort like that. But you know what? God had other ideas. And literally within days of that handoff, Pastor Adam Utek left Grace Community Fellowship in Hillsboro for church ministry back in his home state of Wisconsin. He'd given 5 years of really excellent leadership there. And their elders asked if I would come as their interim pastor. I began the very next Sunday. And we were there for a year. And we have often... we and they have marveled at the timing. It really was a God thing. And during that year in Hillsboro, some really special things happened. First, a building program that they had begun under Adam's leadership continued. And on October 7th of last year, they dedicated a beautifully designed and very functional building of their own. Second, the elders asked if I would be part of their pastoral search team. And so I joined that effort, and we ended up snatching Mike Barter right out from under your nose here to be the pastor there. And Mike is a former pastor, and he was serving here as an elder. He is now their lead pastor, and I'm telling you, they love him. That, too, was a God thing. And so as Mike got established there, we assumed that we'd come back here and start getting involved. But, you know, once again, God had a little different idea. A couple of years ago, the leadership of a small church in Ellsworth, Kansas, asked us here at Grace to help them set up a pastoral search. They'd been without a pastor for several years. Now, the connection between Grace Community Church here and Harvest Bible Church there is right here in the congregation, and it's Micah Holscher. He and his wife, Becca, work in children's ministry here at Grace, and one of Harvest Bible Church's elders is Micah's brother, Andrew. And so Pastor Steve and I met with their leaders in Applebee's to help them set up their search, and they did, and it yielded 75 or 80 responses. But you know what? Out of all of those, there wasn't one that really seemed to be a fit there. God just didn't open the door to that. So they asked if I would come help them again, and their elders had done almost all of the preaching for several years, but you know what, they have families and jobs, and it was kind of tough going for them. And so in mid-September last year, Marilyn and I began making the 1.5-hour trip to Ellsworth most weekends. I preached, coached, you know what, and we fell in love with that church family. They have so much going for them. Lots of kids, a wonderful building. They seem to be thriving in spite of not having had a pastor. And so we're in the middle of working with the pastoral candidate right now. We're asking the Lord for discernment about him maybe taking on that role. They're also considering becoming a part of our Fellowship of Evangelical Churches. Just pray for them. You know, so we may be involved there for some time yet, or we may be nearly done. God knows we're okay with that. Now, one outcome of those experiences with Grace Community Fellowship and Harvest Bible Church is that we've made some really special friends in both places, people who are godly and they're committed followers of Christ, and we're so profoundly enriched now to include them in our circle of not just acquaintances but friends. And though the last year and a half didn't go quite like we had planned, we know God's plans are best. The New Testament teaches that the local church is God's primary tool to accomplish his mission of making disciples. And so in a way, I feel more reassigned than retired, but it really is nice to have a little more relaxed schedule and the freedom to do some of the things that I've talked about, serve other church families in other places. We've also been able to do things like, for me to be part of the team that went to Bolivia to help establish our first international church plant, the Emmanuel Church in the greater Santa Cruz area, in partnership with Compassion International. Marilyn and I and a couple of our grandkids went to Mexico last year with our trip here. And while we don't know what's next, we're not too concerned about it. But whatever that is, as God gives us strength, we intend to continue the mission. And there are two scriptures that I want to share with you among many in the Bible that describe that mission. One comes from Psalm 145, verse 1. One generation shall commend your works to another and shall declare your mighty acts. And the second scripture is 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2. And what you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others. That's what we want to be about. Thank you.